Yeah, so really what we're wanting to do is to get some additional information to help us with our students, because I think there's probably a couple of things that we can do quite easily, which is talk about the sort of the wider circumstances of schools and the communities you're working in, and also some of the actual techniques in the classroom.
Okay.
So, like developing grammatical concepts, or getting kids to produce comprehensible input or output and input, those sort of things. But one of the real difficulties we have is getting students to understand the sort of the complicated nature of managing and supporting EAL in schools. And that's really what I wanted to sort of talk to you a bit about.
Okay, no,
really.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, we're sort of an inner city school, and I'll just get my glasses. I've got some data from the set for you. Sorry if I've ruined it for me. We have 80% of our pupils are from minority ethnic backgrounds, and that's obviously significantly above the national average. 25% of those minority ethnics are Black Caribbeans, so obviously English is there, you know, is their primary language. We have got one class, a Year 2 class, where there are 22 different home languages. And it is a big issue for us, so one of the things we did actually sit down and do as part of our school development plan, you can see the things behind you, was actually identify what it was we needed to do to enable the families to settle, to enable the children to access the curriculum, and the strategies that we could employ to do that. Now, Birmingham has got a very good system, because it is one of the main cities in the country that has a lot of ethnic minorities and EAL children. There are already some things in place. So we use what the authority have got, and it's things like, there's a little pack that you can get, and it's things like they'll have a picture of a table and the word table alongside it, so it's symbol and word association.
So are there support structures within the local authority that you can call upon?
There used to be a lot more. There isn't so much now, obviously, because of funding. There used to be I'm not sure what it stands for actually, EMAG, but there used to be
Ethnic Minority Advisory Group, something like that.
Something along those lines. So that used to be our first point of call, but obviously the pressures of finance that have meant that isn't always accessible for us. One of the if they are new to the country, you can apply for a £500 grant. That you just fill the paperwork in.
Is that from local authority, or
that goes to the local authority? Yes, and then that is. But I do believe it's a centrally held budget that is devolved for newly arrived people. Now, with that then allows us, how we use that money is that we contact SWIS, which is the translation service, Schools Translation Service. So we've just had an Eritrean family arrive. We've had actually 5 children start this week. So we've got in touch with them so that we've got somebody to come, and a Tigrini interpreter to come and work with the children there in reception in Year 1. So that and he'll come in every morning from next Monday until Easter for a couple of hours just to work with the children mainly. A big cohort that we've got now, and an increasingly big cohort, is Chinese. So we do have a Chinese translator that comes in 2 mornings a week, but also comes to parents' night. So we had parents' night last night, and he comes to that.
Just in terms of using translators, I'm just wondering how you use them. Is anybody sort of got experience of best ways of using them?
Yes, well, I'm going to sort of swap over to Julie Pattinson in a little while, because she's our learning mentor, and she works very. I oversee it, and then Julie does the day-to-day work with the translators and with some of our EAL groups as well, because you know we can't expect them to acquire the language without putting a significant input into it. So we do have small groups, and we identify the children's ethnicity, and from that determines then their numbers and the number of them, and what steps we're going to take next.
Can I just take you back a bit in terms of the school policy, and because we've come across lots of schools who've got very well developed policies, but not necessarily doing a large amount of work on the
Okay.
ground,
Okay.
and I know here that that things are developing very quickly,
Yes,
and there's
okay.
large changes.
Yeah.
So, in terms of overall management of the EAL, well, I couldn't say provision, but management of
Okay. You could say
services.
provision,
Yeah.
I think, because that is what they have got. There is a difference for those children, not a learning difference. I think we've come a long way from the days where EAL children used to be classed as special needs children, but they do have to be provided for. So you do have to take the approaches. Now, some of it does have to come out of your own school budget, because you know the EMAG money doesn't cover everything. So in terms of staffing, we do have to. I mean, ultimately, in every school you'll find that it's about achieving the best outcomes for children anyway. So it's about what the child needs, not what the child wants, really.
Sure. So what specifically have you done in terms of whole school policy for supporting EAL children?
Really, it starts at the admission stage. So we find out that as much as we possibly can about the backgrounds of the families. I mean, if they're a Catholic family, because we are a faith school, then we tend to find out a lot from that. We work in collaboration with the church, so we find out from the community. Really, what you've got to do is you've got to find out a lot of information before the children start, so that you can get things prepared for them.
So who actually does that?
It's
job?
myself or the head or the learning mentor are involved in that.
Okay.
And when we have the overall say-so with admissions, really. And we have to follow a set criteria that's set by the governing body. And really the policy is very similar for any other curriculum area, really. Is, you know, it's what the children need, it's not what the children want, and therefore to access the curriculum they need X, Y, Z, whatever it is, whether it's signs in the home language, whether it's access to translators, whether it's symbols, whatever it is that they need, then we just put in place.
Okay.
And we've had you know, over the last few years we've had an awful lot of different languages in school, you know, so we've had to adapt and change and you know, reflect on what has worked and what hasn't worked.
So when did it start changing that the numbers of languages you were dealing with start to take off?
Well, I've been here 3 years, and I've seen a significant shift in 3 years. It used to be, I mean, we are 30% Catholic, which is very big in this area, and it used to be an awful lot of black Caribbean families and mixed race Caribbean families. And really, in the 3 years that I've seen it, I've been here, there's been a significant difference. We've had a lot of asylum seekers. We've had a lot of we've had families from Eritrea. We've had families from Afghanistan. We've had Eastern European families. You know, obviously with the European market as well. Do we call that anymore? But you know, the relaxation of the borders. We've had Polish families. We've had a lot of different, and we've also had a significant number of African families that have come in. So and they've come in to need us. Now, sometimes that does affect your mobility because you have families here for a while and then they move on. But we have had a sustained period of stability really in the last 18 months or so.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So large numbers of new communities that you're dealing with.
Yes.
I'm just wondering about the staff as a whole and class teachers and what you've done to support them to be able to support all these kids.
Well, obviously, what we you know, there's always a system of school of staff meetings and inset. So we just, you know, we use staff meetings to go over when we are reviewing. You know, policies, and we have termly pupil progress meetings. So we look at progress of children, and we look at the different needs within the classroom. So if we've identified, you can do a baseline assessment on a child that's come from another school in Birmingham, or for a child that's been born in the country. That's quite straightforward. Doing a baseline assessment on a child that's got EAL is significantly more difficult. So when we have the progress meetings, then we can sit down and really drill down what we're going to do and talk it over with the teacher, and then we'll whatever is needed that determines what our actions are. So it could be we've got within the library we've got a little section of EAL resources. So we've got tapes in different languages, and we've got some you know, some little packs that we can work with the children at the first when they first come in. And a lot of the things with the younger children are done through games. You know, there's balls with different languages and cards and things like that.
Yeah. So has it? Do you think it's actually changed the nature of the school in the last couple of years?
Yes, I would say so. I would say so.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know what will happen with Birmingham aren't going to take so many asylum seekers in the next financial year. Whether that will change things or not, I don't know. But we've certainly had a period of stability. But we are still taking in new children. As I said, we're virtually full, but we've had 5 new children that have come this week, and they're all EAL.
Right. Yeah.
You know, that have moved into the area.
Okay. Now, the last thing I want to ask you about really is for trainee teachers. One of the big issues that is the lack of training that teachers as a whole have had in regards to teaching.
It used to be the same
EAL.
with special needs, actually. I can remember when I was because I haven't always been a teacher, but when I was completed my training 10 years ago, there hadn't been much about special needs, but I have noticed that there isn't. It's very similar with the EAL, and there is more about. But I think it's only really just starting.
So it's just beginning to come through.
So I think in terms of them, really, they need to. Most schools should have a policy and a procedure to what to follow. So in terms of their first placement, for instance, their first appointment, they would need to be very familiar with the cohorts and very familiar with the school practices. And I mean, I think the college is very good in the way that it's organised the placements and the different schemes that have been going on. I know we had 3 girls recently, didn't we? And Birmingham, if they are going to work in Birmingham, there are a lot of resources that the authority do, and it's becoming familiar with those, and it's actually understanding, really, that if a child has got EAL, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not very bright or you know, that they are. You know, we've had a child. I'll give you for instance. He arrived from China. We have a big Chinese community here from Wingip, and they like to send them here. Now they're sponsored for a few years now. He arrived in September and he could not speak. He could not read any English. He couldn't write any English. He couldn't speak. He's had the translator 2 mornings a week. He's in year 6. He's just done a written assessment, piece of writing, and he was level 3. Now that is significant progress from September. So there are some very, very bright EAL children there. So it's just making sure that you access the correct resource that's appropriate for them. And the staff are more than willing, really, to, you know, they want the children to do well, so they're more than willing to take on board anything that we said and use any resources, because we are very well resourced now. Because you had to be. You've had to learn how to be, really, because you can't leave the children without anything, so we've had to learn how to be.
Can I go back a bit to your policies? Is that something that you've been developing as you go along, or is that something that was already here, or is it something written down that has been ratified by governors?
Yeah, we have. If you have a good teaching and learning policy, everything else is underpinned, really. So we've got a very good teaching and learning policy, and overcoming barriers to learning. Of which really EAL is a barrier to learning, isn't it? So there isn't a specific EAL policy. There has to be for some of the different groups, but there isn't for an EAL. It comes within the good teaching and learning policy, learning and teaching, as we know now.
Okay.
But there isn't a specific policy for EAL.
Okay. I've actually got one. I think I did mention to you. I've got a German student with an Eritrean student who's I wanted to speak to you about, because she's very, very interested in coming and doing some work with some Eritrean children and families.
Yeah, because one of the things we do find with the Eritrean families, because they've got the worst human rights in the world, we have noticed that we're very conscious that some of their families are very vulnerable. You know, they are. And some of the children, I'll give you an example of a little boy that we had in reception. I don't know if I told you this, but his family walked out of Eritrea, so they walked, we anticipate it was 4,000 miles through the Sudan, through Iraq, up to Italy. And when the little lad arrived into reception, he's beautiful, he kept complaining of having, his teeth were hurting. So we had some seminarians, some training priests here, one of whom was Italian. So we asked him to go and speak to this little boy and say, what's the problem? And it turned out that his teeth hurt him. So he went to the dentist and he had 18 of his 20 teeth removed. Now his mother was really distressed by all that, so it would be really useful to have somebody that was, you know, could speak them, that would help out.
Right, I know that there's lots of different dialects and different languages from Eritrea.
Of course, I think it's Tigrinya.
So my student speaks Tigrinya, so I think it might well be the same language. I'm just wondering what would be the best way, whether I get her to get in touch with you.
That would be lovely. I've already spoken to the head about it. She's more than willing.
Fantastic.
So there's no problem with that. That would be great.
Okay.
It helps the families settle better. That's what we find the benefits with the translators. The families appreciate it.
Absolutely.
They don't miss out. I mean, for instance, year 6, we've got 6 Chinese children, and so when it came to the transition and them having to decide which school it was, it's helpful for us because we're able to say to the translator, you know, this is what we're trying to do, and he then translates it to them, and it makes the families feel better. We know that they're getting the correct message, and then that makes things a bit easier when, for instance, the placements come through. Yeah. So we work very closely with them.
Yeah. So what would you say is your sort of biggest problem in the whole area of EAL in school?
Probably getting resources, and probably we can't baseline the children. So I'm always very conscious that we've got the child in a class, and I want to make sure that the curriculum can be differentiated, can be made so that they don't just sit there, because I won't say where it was in another school, but I have seen a child, an EAL child, when all they were told to do was to copy the work of the child next to them, and that's a terrible loss for this child. But it was really, when I was talking to the school afterwards, they just said they actually didn't know what to do with this child, and that's the biggest problem, I think. If you don't know what to do, so people just go for what they think might be suitable, but that child isn't learning.
I think it's a real problem when you've got people saying, right, I don't know where to start, whereas if you've got some kind of start.
Well, I think it's about, it's about, a lot of it is picture cues against words, and then you say it. So table, word, table, say it. So you try, a lot of it is repetition. And obviously having a translator in to talk about, common things such as tables and chairs and routines and things really helps them. But children have a great capacity to learn as well, and they pick things up. When they're immersed in the language in school, they pick things up very quickly.
So in a way, it's quite simple what we're looking to do, and in a way, one of the most important things is to get teachers to know, right, it's quite easy to make a start.
Don't be scared. Don't be scared. I remember years ago with special needs children, I've actually had an NQT one year said to me, I'm really worried, I'm really scared about the child, because they were frightened that they were going to fail the child. But I said, it's a child at the end of the day with a different, with an additional need. Fundamentally, so it's quite, the basics are quite straightforward, really. It's just people having access to the information or knowing where to look. And different authorities have various different schemes. Birmingham Mob. You've got to sit there, Jim.
Oh, thanks for that.
I'm Chris Watts from University College, and one of my jobs there is to help with our teacher training students on EAL and training. So we run a couple of specialist modules there. We're also looking at what we can do for our teacher trainees as a whole, because the TDA, in its wisdom, has quite clearly identified that a lot of newly qualified teachers feel that they haven't been trained up in how to support EAL across the board. So that's really where we are, and we're looking at one of the things that we were trying to do is to give our teacher trainees across the board, a bit wider access to people actually in the field and what they're actually doing with it.
Right.
So I was just talking to Alison about sort of wider school policies and procedures and how they manage things as a whole. And I'd just be quite interested to see what you do.
What I do, yeah. It's you know, as I said at the moment, I said we've got a big input Chinese children. We had a massive influx of Chinese children. We had a couple that have come through Key Stage 2, but we've had in reception. There's actually 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 children with Chinese EAL, and then there's one that speaks Tigrinya and Italian, so he's got a combined language. And they came in, all of them came in with no English at all. So basically, and obviously the positive thing is when they come in younger, when they come in reception, they're learning at the same level as everybody else. So from experience, children that do come in reception from the beginning do tend to do a lot better because obviously they're learning the phonics and there. So what I do, first of all, I mean, I had a couple of your students come in that come in and work there. With the little ones, I do a lot of it through play. It's, you know, because it's, you know, they're all over the place. There's no language. So we start off with basic games like matching. You know, so I've got some colour cards, all different colours, and just to see if they've got the ability to match cards. So we play like a matching game. So that's what, you know, I just try and see what they're able to do. So if they can match a colour, or they can, you show them a picture of something, and if they can choose an object off the table that matches. So it's just to see if they've got that understanding that that is that. And then we start off with very basic things like hello, my name is. And in a smaller group, what you tend to find is they're a bit more confident, you know, because in a classroom environment they don't tend to speak. I mean, a little girl, she's from Eritrea, she's literally been here 2 months. Came into class, hadn't heard her speak, but when I fetched her into a small group, just her and 2 others, we found out she could say hello, we found out she could say my name, she could say a couple of colours, and you know, so there was very basic there, but because they're in a big classroom environment,
you can't get it.
No, so you know, even something as simple as answering the name to the register, little tiny steps.
So what about the kids who are entering later on in school?
Yeah, that's very difficult. I mean, if they've got no language at all, we've got lots of dictionaries and, you know, interpretation there. But what we have done, we've employed an interpreter, Michael, who's been absolutely fantastic, because it not only helps with the children, it also helps with the parents as well. I mean, he comes to parents' evening, because that's a barrier there as well. And again, you're starting off at the basic level. They tend to pick it up very quickly, but what you tend to find is I've got a little girl in year 4. She can copy English, you know, but has got, and so you're getting a false sense of what she's able to do because she's copied all this beautiful work out, just sentence of the day. But when you go back to it, she's got no comprehension of it. So you're going back to, again, the basics, not the alphabet, the colours, simple objects around the room, so that they can start functioning. And then with Michael's support as well, what we try and do is like further up. So we're doing word matching, we're doing verbs and all of that. But as I said, the hard thing is because the Chinese children are very bright, we're finding maths seems to be across the board. That's something we're finding even from a younger age. They actually are excelling in mathematics right from start one. And it's always that they've still got that kind of not that understanding. And a very interesting experience I had with a little boy in year 6, we took him to a secondary school, St Edmund Campion, and they were assessing him, and his understanding, you know, reading a passage and being able to draw from that passage a simple text of who, what, where. There's still that concept and that, and you know, that comes with time, and if they come in later, it takes them a long time to get up to that.
I can see the real benefits of using interpreters. So you've got Chinese
Yeah.
interpreter. What about where you've got kids who you don't have access to interpreters?
Well, what the foremost is at the bottom line is that they need to learn English, you know, and with the interpreters, as I said, the only help there, because we do insist, it helps the children, because obviously we can't speak their language, but as I said, if we, with the little ones, we've not used an interpreter, so we've basically gone to learn English, because, and we found that they, as I said, have picked it up. I mean, the little group that I have, they've, I mean, luckily one of your students saw them at the beginning and now, and they've progressed so much, because when they come to me, it has to be English, so a lot of visual, we use an awful lot of visual things, and then it's very repetitive, so when they come to me, I have them 20 minutes, half an hour, we focus on things and we move on, so we did colours, then we did numbers, then we did things in the classroom, and then we're just starting on prepositions at the moment, doing through it. But again, it's constant, repetitive, through play, Teddy, on the chair, under the chair, in the bar. But it's that repetitiveness, and that's actually what sticks. And then you've got to see if they can put that in content. So it's not a Teddy, it's something else. So see if they can be able to do that.
So I can see how you're doing that with small groups. I was just sort of looking at your EAL list there. So you've got the sort of large numbers there.
Yes.
So how
I mean, not, from the list from there, but also from the list from there, some the EAL, I'm looking at some of them, the second one, they, even though English is not their first language, they were born over here, they've been educated here, so it's their home language.
Right, yeah.
When you look at the pocket of children that are EAL, whereas they've literally come over here.
Okay, so these are people who are, you've got large numbers of EAL who've got English as a second language and have another language, but you've got a smaller number who are new to English.
Newly arrived, so that's like a different thing altogether, you know, but we still class them as EAL because they are dual language, and at home they speak Chinese, Eritrean or whatever degree, that's the language that they speak at home, but they are competent in English because they've been born over here and they've gone through the education setting, but it's the children that literally are just coming new into the country, you know, that is very difficult, and what we try and do, as I said, is put things in the classroom, so again using a lot of visual timetables, using a basic translation book for them for things, you know, do you understand this question, you know, it's time for this. Polish boy, we've got very nice translation sites as well we use, you know, because we've got access to laptops, those are absolutely very good as well.
Okay. Is there anything that you're asking class teachers to do specifically to...
bottom line is what we try and do is not be under the pretence that they understand. That's the first and foremost. You know, because even though they said they're competent in writing and copying out, you know, don't always assume that they understand what they're doing, because 9 times out of 10 they probably don't. To be very, you know, to make sure they've got visual. I mean, one thing we're setting up now is trying to get dual language in those cash rooms. But we have got newly arrived children to label things up in the dual language. We're in the process of doing that. But just to be conscious that, you know, don't presume. You know, that's the main one. And to again, differentiated work as well, to pitch right back. You know, and to me personally, you know, I find it pointless that they're copying out all the, you know, they're doing this, but they're not learning because that's, you know, not what they're able to do. So it's, and also as what you tend to find is that they end up in the lower, because we've got setted groups as well. So they do go into the less able groups for obviously English because it's pitched at their level. And then obviously assessed and moved up. But with the maths, as I said, you know, they tend to be able to do that. So
why do you think that the Chinese children are particularly good at maths?
We were talking about that actually, funny enough. I was talking about that with somebody because of all of them I've come across, they are all striving in there. So whether it's something, you know, because we're saying over in China, what are they doing? Because some of the children are coming over, that they've obviously been educated. But their education system, you know, is obviously must be superior because they're coming in, they're working at high levels.
Or is it also the parental input?
Oh, we
as
think
well?
so, because a lot of our Chinese children, and as said, and this was purely through the interpreter as well when we're talking, but they go to Chinese school.
Yeah.
Education is, and a lot of them have gone to music lessons and there, so it's very academic. They're very focused there. And also, what was